After an 11-win season a year ago, Missouri returns looking for more. College football playoff or bust in Como. It sure does feel that way. We're talking all things Missouri Tigers. Gabe DeArmond of Power Mizzou helping us break down all things Missouri entering this 2024 college football season. Gabe, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. What's going on?
No problem. Just, what are we, 10 days, 15 days, something like that away. So I guess it's time we all got to start working again.
Time flies when you're having fun, certainly, Gabe. And Mizzou had a lot of fun in 2023, Gabe. Let's first look back at the 2023 season, sort of set the scene how we got to this point currently. I mentioned 11-2, 6-2 in conference. You win the Cotton Bowl. You beat Ohio State. But this was a team, Gabe. You go all the way back to SEC Media Days a year ago. Picked to finish 6th in the SEC East. Some Missouri folks I talked to this time of year last year, they were questioning, is Brady Cook the guy under center? Maybe we should give Sam Horn a chance. Is Eli Drinkwitz the guy? Is he really the answer in Como? And my goodness, how much can change in a year? Your thoughts on the 2023 season, what Missouri was able to accomplish, and how Mizzou fans look back on that 23 campaign?
Yeah, there were a few people that predicted it. Now, they were all people that are like on my message board and predicted every year. So good for them. I think there's this because we like to on the internet look back and shame people for everything they were wrong about, right? And so there's a lot of, see, you were wrong about Eli Drinkwitz. Well, it was okay to have some questions going into last year. Like, I never saw anybody say Eli should be fired before last year. And really, those around here weren't even saying, hey, he's going to get fired if he's not good this year. But it was very much, he needs to prove it. Like, we need to see it. We haven't seen it yet. And full credit to him and full credit to Brady Cook and Cody Schrader and a whole bunch of guys that nobody really thought were good enough. They went out and proved it. And I always laugh because, like, my favorite moment, I think, since Missouri joined the SEC is Kirby Smart standing up and saying there were a whole bunch of people that picked us 7-5. No, nobody picked you 7-5, Kirby. Absolutely no one did that. But last year's Missouri team was one of the very few who could stand there and say nobody believed we could do this. And they were right. I mean, I don't think anybody saw that season coming.
Gabe, I got to ask, was it one, you said nobody saw the season coming. What was the level of shock for you? I mean, I'm sure you probably had your typical preseason optimism and excitement. There's obviously a best case scenario, but I mean, did your best case scenario ever involve a double-digit win season?
I think, because I always do that before the season, best case, worst case. In best case, I say this is nobody gets hurt and everything goes your way. And worst case, the opposite. Like everything that could go wrong does go wrong. I want to say my best case last year was 9-3. I said, look, I can draw you a path. They're not beating Georgia. They're not beating LSU. Even best case, they probably lose one more somewhere along the way, right? So my best case was 9-3. I think I picked them 7-5. I said 8-4 is probably more likely than 6-6, but 7-5 was about where I saw them landing. And here's the thing: they weren't far from that, right? That's what college football is. The year before, Missouri went 6-7, and they were probably 3 plays from 9-3. Last year, they were 11-2. And they were probably 4 plays from 7-5. That's how it goes.
So you mentioned, Gabe, Eli Drinkwitz entering his 5th season at Mizzou. I want to go there next because you mentioned, again, the vibe around him this time just last year was much different than it is now. So what is the feeling in Como around Eli Drinkwitz? Because this is the first season I feel like he's really come into, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it's the first season he's really come into in Como where there's some big-time expectations, right? I mean, it feels very college football playoff robust, where in years past, you tell Missouri fans, hey, you're going to go 8-4. It's like, we had a pretty good year. You go 8-4 this year, Gabe, I don't think anybody's going to be thrilled about it. So anyways, I say all that to say, what is now the mood, the temperature check of the fan base when it comes to drink?
Eli Drinkwitz could tell these people to go punch their mothers in the face, and most of them would do it. I mean, he runs the athletic department. He's in charge here. He is the king. And look, when you're a good football coach, especially in this league, you get that. I don't say that as like a negative thing. And I have joked, and I've told people in the program this. If they find a way to host a college football playoff game, they've got a $250 million stadium renovation they just announced, which in the age of NIL and we've got to find a way to revenue share and pay our players that's aggressive, right? If they host a home playoff game, Eli Drinkwitz can stand at midfield at opening kickoff and tell everyone in the stands he hates them, please write him a check, and they will do it. Like, that is where he stands, and that is where this season could take him. Now, he's got to go do it, right? But right now, they are taking bids to build the statue, and we'll see where that stands in 14 weeks, because I think even Eli would tell you, hey, we're all 1 year away from nobody liking us at all.
So, Gabe, let's dive into this 2024 Missouri Tigers football team. We'll start on the offensive side. Brady Cook is back as QB1 after an incredible season he had a year ago. Luther Burden III returns as arguably the best wide receiver in the SEC. Theo Weiss right next to him. And I think a really, Gabe, underrated wide receiver, too. I don't think Theo Weiss gets enough credit for what he does. Mookie Cooper is also back, along with Mekhi Miller and Marquise Johnson, amongst a host of others as well. Brett Nortfleet back as one of the SEC's best tight ends. The big question offensively, Gabe, obviously, who replaces Cody Schrader at the running back position? You bring in Marcus Carroll from Georgia State, Nate Noel from App State. Is it going to be a RB1? Is there going to be a 1-2 punch, running back by committee? How's it going to work out? Somebody's going to emerge there to be that dynamic factor in the run game. And then on the offensive line, 2 of 5 starters are back. You got to replace all SEC left tackle Javon Foster. You did add, most notably, Oklahoma transfer Caden Green, which certainly sent shockwaves to the folks down there in Norman. All that being said, though, most folks I talk to, Gabe, they're high on this Missouri offense. They're optimistic. It starts with Brady Cook-Luther Burden. Your thoughts on what the Tigers are going to look like this season on the offensive side?
Not a lot of questions offensively, honestly. I mean, you mentioned the offensive line. They lose 2 starters, but they replace them with Caden Green, who was a starter at Oklahoma as a true freshman, and Marcus Bryant, who was an all-AAC player at SMU. SMU was not yet in the ACC. They now are. But, so I think no questions there. Brady's back. His top 7 pass catchers are back from last year, which in this day and age in college football is that's unheard of. The only thing they really have to replace, like you said, is Cody Schrader. And look, I actually had Bill Connolly from ESPN on our podcast a couple days ago, and we were talking about it's the least valuable position in all of sports, right? I mean, Cody did great things last year, had a year that absolutely nobody could have expected. And yet he is an undrafted free agent fighting to make his way as a 3rd string guy, maybe in San Francisco, right? Mm-hmm. So what does that tell you? Kind of tells you we like to do this, WAR or VORP, right? Value over replacement player. Maybe a lot of guys could have done that. Maybe he had a pretty good line and a pretty good passing game. And I've hesitated. I've said this like 27 times this preseason, and I always preface it with, this is not an insult to Cody Schrader. I don't mean to devalue what he meant to Missouri and what his story was. It's just, we see it at running back. How much of it was the running back and how much of it was everything around him? Well, everything around the guy that is going to replace him is back. Everything I hear tells me Nate Noel is going to be the starting running back here, which I think says a lot because Marcus Carroll was the 7th leading rusher in college football last year, and he's here and I think is probably the backup. Now, they're both going to get carries. I don't see a scenario where it's like it was last year where Cody got, 77% of the carries. I think it's going to be more evenly split. But everything I hear out of Missouri camp is they absolutely love what Nate Noel's done since coming over from App State.
So, Gabe, let's switch to the defensive side of the football. I feel like if there are questions with this team, this is where they're most likely going to be. To give credit to that Missouri defense again, Gabe, last year, you allowed 14 or fewer points in 4 of the final 6 games of the season. You can win a lot of games doing that. Blake Baker obviously gone to LSU. Corey Batoon takes over as the defensive coordinator. 3 of the top 4 tacklers are gone from 2023. You got to replace guys like Darius Robinson and 3 NFL-bound defensive backs as well. But there is some experience back. Christian Williams is back in the middle. You did add Florida transfer Chris McClellan there as well on the inside of the defensive line. Freshman Williams Winery, is that how you say his last name?
Winery. Yeah.
Winery. Okay, fair enough. He's expected to contribute. That was a huge signing for Drink and the gang. Johnny Walker Jr. on the edge is back as well. Chuck Hicks returns as a veteran at linebacker. You've got Dalen Carnell, Joseph Charleston back in the secondary, and you picked up Clemson transfer Toriano Pride Jr., which was a pretty big pickup.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question, Gabe, how many questions are there on the Missouri defense, and can Corey Batoon keep this thing rolling? What do you expect from that side of the ball?
I think the biggest thing to replace, and this is not breaking news, right? He was a first-round draft pick, is Darius Robinson, and not just his production on the field, but he was the guy that the rest of that defense lined up behind and said, tell us where to go. Like years down the road, if Eli builds this into what he wants to, Darius Robinson's going to be one of the guys that fans look back and say, man, he started this. Like he was the first guy. And so I think that's the biggest issue. Zion Young. Now the deal about where we're at in college football now, you're not replacing these guys with freshmen, right? Or with recruits who have been here 2 or 3 years. You're replacing them with guys who have done it at other Power 5 programs. Zion Young comes in from Michigan State, where he was he contributed. And he is if you look at Zion Young, you think NFL defensive end, just physically. We'll see if he turns into that, but I expect him to start. Darius Smith, who came in from Georgia, was having a pretty good camp, getting a lot of talk. On Tuesday afternoon in practice, tore up his knee. He's out for the season. So they're going to turn to Joe Moore, to Georgia Tech transfer Eddie Kelly. You mentioned Williams Winery, and it's interesting because the first question I got as soon as we broke the Darius Smith news on Wednesday morning was, so Winery's up, right? No, Williams Winery's a 5-star kid, number 8 player in the country, and he's going to be just kind of a guy that I think plays a little bit this year. But you don't ask a defensive lineman to come straight out of high school in Lee Summit, Missouri, and to contribute in the SEC heavily as a freshman. I mean, I think he'll get some run on the field, especially the first 4 games, but I don't think he's a major part of it. Tyron Hopper's gone at linebacker. But again, you've got Corey Flagg, transfer from Miami. Khalil Jacobs, transfer over 100 tackles at South Alabama, played for Corey Batoon. In the secondary, transfer Toriano Pride is back there, right? Marvin Burks, a 4-star kid who's a sophomore this year, probably going to replace Jalen Carlisle at the safety spot opposite Charleston. So there are guys that look ready to contribute. We mostly know who the starters are going to be. Linebacker, I've got a few questions, but Drink said last week, look, camp is about, can players 35 through 50 help us win? And that's where Missouri's never really been. I mean, their 2013 team, 1 through 22, was as good. I don't know if they were everybody as good as Auburn. I mean, they 1 through 22, they were as good as Auburn. They weren't as good on that one day, but maybe 22 through 44, they weren't. The next year, they go back to the SEC title game. Shane Ray gets ejected, I think, on Alabama's second series. That game was over. The guy that came in for Shane Ray wasn't as good as Shane Ray. So that's your goal, right, for that second string, because you're going to need them. I mean, Darius Smith goes down. We've seen already Texas is losing guys. Like, you're going to need the second and third string guys.
It's all about depth in the SEC for sure. Hey, let's talk, Gabe, special teams, right? How can we go in this segment without talking about Harrison Mevis? Salute to the thicker kicker. He is gone. The big question, hey, listen, one of the biggest questions, who takes over at kicker? I mean, Harrison Mevis, think about what last season is without him nailing. It was that 61-yarder against Kansas State, set the tone, got momentum going. Got to replace him. Luke Bauer, Orion Phillips are battling for the punting job. There should be some excitement, I would imagine, the return game when you can put a guy like Luther Burden back there, and you got some other guys who are really athletic as well. So is there a reason, Gabe, to be excited about Missouri special teams? And again, who replaces the thicker kicker? And there's no way they have as cool a nickname, right?
Yeah, no, Blake Craig is more kicker size, which is unfortunate. I mean, look, I am on board with the 260-pound kicker. And frankly, I think most roster sizes are a little on the high side. I don't know. Harrison, 260 might have been a little low last year at times, to be quite honest. I loved it. But, the thing about Mevis was in the last two, now his first 2 years, he was automatic. I mean, he was great. His last 2 years, he actually struggled quite a bit. Accuracy-wise, he was down he was 6th or 7th accuracy-wise in the SEC last year. I mean, I think a lot of people remember 2 years ago, he missed a 20-yarder that would have won the Auburn game. But that 61-yarder, and it was almost like the further he got from the uprights, the better he was, which was really weird. But he had some big kicks, no question about it. But he missed a lot the last few years. And so or last 2 years. So I think replacing him probably is viewed as more daunting outside Columbia than it is inside Columbia. And look, a kicker, you never know, right?
Mm.
I don't care. I could watch Blake Craig kick 97 straight field goals in practice. I don't care until he's out there in front of 104,000 in College Station and he's got to make one. What's he do then? That's the only time it matters. And you can't simulate that in practice. So we'll see. Punter, yeah, it's Luke Bauer or Ryan Phillips. I don't know. Look, I would give it to Luke Bauer because he's the best passer, as we saw at Kentucky last year, threw a really nice touchdown pass. Punt returner, it's pretty interesting. I'm not sure Luther's going to do it. He's like, when he gets the ball in his hands, obviously he's a threat to score every time, but he doesn't catch the punt on the fly a lot. Like, he hasn't been a great return man when he's done it. When Missouri needed to make sure they caught the ball and took over, it was Chris Abrams' drain last year. So I'm not sure it'll be Luther back there. It's kind of a tough situation, because if he's going to have any chance to be invited to the Heisman ceremony or win he has to do that, right? Mm-hmm. You can't do it as just a receiver. But what's best for the team, I'm not sure it's him returning punts.
Mm. So we look at the 2024 season, Gabe. 12 starters are back from Missouri, 7 on the offensive side, 5 on the defense. As we take a look at the 2024 schedule, this is one, Gabe, that when it comes to college football playoff contenders, it may be, I'm not going to call it favorable, but one of the more manageable slates. Favorable's fair, yeah. Manageable, favorable, whatever you want to use. It works out in Mizzou's favor to a degree. You start out Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and then you open SEC play with Vanderbilt. Those are your first 4 games. So a couple weeks to answer some questions. You do have to go to Texas A&M for your first SEC road trip. You're at UMass, which is one of the most random road trips in college football this year. You've got Auburn at Alabama. Will be a really fun one, tricky game, obviously. Oklahoma coming to town. Gabe, I've called that the most underrated bad blood game of the season. At South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and then Arkansas at home. So, Gabe, when you take a look at that 2024 slate, what jumps out to you initially?
Well, I think they've got a 4-game season. If we're talking college football playoff, this comes down to 4 games, because those first 4, and then obviously UMass, you can't lose. If they lose any of those games, I'm going to let you come run my message board for the next week, because I'm not going to get on there. And then the last 3, really, like South Carolina, Mississippi, Arkansas. Look, can you lose to those? Sure, you can lose to those teams. Those teams might beat somebody, and it might be Missouri. But if you lose one of those, we're probably not talking about playoffs. So this season, to me, comes down to at A&M, at Alabama, home against Auburn and Oklahoma. You're going to have to, at a minimum, win 2 of those. If you do everything else you're supposed to do and you win 2 of those, you're 10-2, and then you take your chances. Like, are there worlds in which you can go 10-2 and miss it? Sure. But I think you would take your chances at 10-2. If there's one that you look at and say, yeah, probably not real likely, it's obviously in Tuscaloosa. I mean, maybe Alabama's a little bit down, but I think, Kalen DeBoer doesn't lose a lot of games. Doesn't matter where he is, and I think he'll have a good team. At College Station is tough, but I think most models I've seen have that as like a pick'em type game. Oklahoma here is going to be about a pick'em type game. If you can split those games and then take care of Auburn, I mean, this is a team. Look, the over-under is 9.5. I think that's exactly where it should be. I mean, I think this Missouri team should go into the season thinking we should win 10 games. Whether they go get it done or not, who knows? But the schedule, the preseason poll, and we know they can be wrong, but of the top 7 teams, and really 6, because Missouri's one of the 7, of the top 6, Missouri plays 1. Of the bottom 4, Missouri plays them all. I don't really know. If you don't call that favorable, I don't know what you call it. And Missouri fans are a little tired of hearing it. They get offended when people say they have an easy schedule. And what I say is it's not an easy schedule, but for the SEC, it's an easy schedule.
Manageable is why I say that word. And again, don't apologize for it, to your point, because you need a manageable schedule that is conducive to a big year. Ole Miss isn't apologizing. LSU, you could say, it's navigatable.
You know who had a pretty easy schedule last year? Michigan. Cool. Right. They went and won all the games, and they got to hang a banner and get some rings. Whether they get to keep them is another issue, but, got to hang them, and we all saw it happen.
Gabe, going back to Eli Drinkwitz, because the big question, not just Eli Drinkwitz, but just Eli Drinkwitz's Missouri program, the big question I've had all offseason, Gabe, is who are you really when it comes to Missouri? Like, this season for me is who are you really? So how important is it for Eli Drinkwitz and this team to follow up what they did last year? Because you know what the narrative is going to be if they stumble. It was a one-off. It was a fluke. That's not who you really are. Like, this isn't some 10-win per year program. Eli Drinkwitz is still a 6-6 whatever coach. How important do you think it is that, again, they take advantage of this schedule and live up to the hype and live up to the expectations?
Okay, so what are we saying? Follow it up. Are we talking have to win 10? I won't put that on this team. I think the way I broke down the SEC is you've got three teams. It's Alabama, it's Texas, and Georgia. If they don't make the playoff, this is a failure. I mean, it just at those schools, it is. Missouri and Ole Miss, look, there's every reason to think you can make a playoff. If fans are expecting it, great. That's the good part of being a fan, right? There's a lot of things to like about your team. But if you are Missouri, if you are Ole Miss, if you go 9-3, I'm not going to call 9-3 in the SEC a failure of a season. Now, it will leave you feeling like maybe you missed an opportunity a little bit. Yeah, I think 9-3 would be mildly disappointing. What I said is 9-3, you don't apologize for it, but you maybe left something out there. 8-4, that's a little, you basically lost every swing game, and that's a little, anything less than 8-4. And look, nobody's getting fired or anything, but they're really hard questions to answer, assuming everybody's healthy. If you're worse than 8-4, then yes, all those takes are going to come out, and they're probably going to be valid. So even 8-4, I think 8-4 would be a poor job by this team.
Gabe, I want to ask you this question because I just think it's interesting, like the Missouri perspective. And I think what Missouri, not just the fans, those that cover the team, deal with on a year in, year out basis from the standpoint of the lack of respect. Like, I'd imagine this is a program with a chip on the shoulder, and there are many out there, but like with Mizzou, you see the comments and you hear that they shouldn't be in the SEC thing, or they're not a real SEC team. I mean, and it's still somehow, I mean, there's fan bases in Fayetteville and the other Columbia that are still talking, and maybe some others as well. Norman, just thoughts on that.
Oklahoma gets to talk about who should and shouldn't be in the SEC.
I just want to get your thoughts on that, Chatter, because I always just find it fascinating that because I'll even sit there and wonder, and I'm like, I get fan back and forth banter, jawing, but I'm like, it's been 12 years, and Mizzou still just gets – I don't know why it's so hard for people to acknowledge and at least just give credit to what Mizzou has done on the football field.
Well, my first answer to that always is, like, who cares who thinks you belong? You're here. Like, you get the money. You play the games. Who cares if you're waiting around for Tennessee fans to give you credit, you're going to have a long wait. That's not going to happen. Right. But I wrote a little something about this earlier this week. I find it funny. I think the fan bases that you most hear it from, like you said, it's Arkansas, it's South Carolina, it's Tennessee. Do you know off the top of your head how many SEC title games those three schools have combined to play in since Missouri has been in the league?
I think it's 0.
It's not. Yeah, it's 0. Missouri played in 2. So like that's your answer if you're a Missouri fan. They have held their own in this league. Now, the highs have been higher than anybody thought. The lows have been pretty low. No question. I mean, 2015 to 2022, this was not a good program. And so A&M might have a better overall record, but they haven't reached some of the heights Missouri has reached in this league. As far as belong or not, I don't know. It's a cultural thing. I mean, I think the two happiest fan bases that Missouri and A&M joined this league were Arkansas and South Carolina, because they joined in 1992 and people still considered them the new kids on the block. I mean, the SEC Good Old Boys Club is a very, very real thing. If you were not here and good in 1968, you're not us. It's cool. You can come, you can hang out with us, but you're going to be at that kid table over there. And Alabama and Georgia and all these teams have been around. We're going to be over here playing the big boy game. In the end, whatever, go win some games. It doesn't really matter. I kind of like the bickering, because what I've never really understood as somebody who did not grow up as an SEC fan is this conference pride thing. No, I grew up a fan of the Big Eight, and you rooted for every team in that league to lose except yours. Like, you didn't want anybody else to be good. What does Florida winning a national title do for Mississippi State? Come on, nobody. I don't get it. So I like the bickering personally. It makes it more fun.
Gabe DeArmond, Power Mizzou, does a fantastic job. Gabe, one final thing, we'll get you out of here. Speaking specifically on this 2024 group, the Missouri Tigers, to get to a college football playoff, let's say hit that 10-win mark or more, lock up a spot in the 12-team playoff. Number one, what does Missouri have to do to make that happen? Like, in your mind, what's the key? What's the thing if they get nailed down or to happen? And what would that mean for the Missouri football program to build off of that 11-win season last year and sort of use this year again to reaffirm, like, hey, we've arrived under Eli Drinkwitz?
Well, to get there, I think the defense has to minimize the step back it takes, right? They can take a step back because I think the offense is going to be better. It just can't be too big. And they got to just, I think most important, they got to go win all the games they're supposed to win. They're going to be favored in 9 or 10 games. So you don't really have to pull an upset to get that done. Just go do what you should do and let the chips fall where they may at the end. What it would mean, I have said a number of times, if they get in position, if they get in that 5 through 8 and they're hosting a playoff game, I mean, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened in Columbia, Missouri. And that's what I love about these games being on campus, right? It would be the biggest thing that's ever happened in Eugene, Oregon, or Oxford, Mississippi, or maybe State College, Pennsylvania, even, some of these places that actually have reached those heights. But there's a lot of Missouri fans that go into this year nervous because they've had a couple chances to do this, right? Coming off 2007, they were preseason number 4 in 2008. Chase Daniels back, Jeremy Maclin was back, and it didn't happen. They lost to Oklahoma State, went down, got blown out at Texas, and then basically season was over. 2014, they're coming off this, SEC title game, all that. They went back to the SEC title game, but they kind of got blown out in it, and people forget early in that season they lost at home to Indiana, right? So even had they beaten Alabama, I'm not 100% sure they make the national title game this year. Now, the difference this year, that first loss doesn't beat you, right? I mean, you can lose at A&M, and hey, your season's not done. You can come back. So with the 12-team playoff, it gives everybody hope a lot longer, and it allows you for maybe an off day or a mistake. But there's no question it would be the biggest thing that this football program has ever done. Now I know a lot of Missouri fans would say, hey, let's go win a conference title because we haven't done that in 55 years. You give me a choice between winning the SEC title and hosting a home playoff game, I think I'm taking the playoff game.
Gabe DeArmond, Power Mizzou, does a great job, like I mentioned, covering all things Missouri Tigers. Gabe, let folks know where they can check out all your work.
Yeah, powermizzou.com. Just type it in, missouri.rivals.com. Either one is going to get you there. And, follow us on social media and all that if you want to, but we try not to put the good stuff out there.
Gabe, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Let's definitely do it again soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.